Good afternoon. Welcome to the workshop session of the Sixth Information System International Conference or ISICO 2021. My name is Hannu, and it is my pleasure to be your master of ceremony for today's session. In this workshop, we will discuss about information system curriculum with Professor Hannu Salmela, professor from Information System Science at Turku School of Economics, Finland. This workshop will include the latest update on IS 2020 curriculum and Merdeka Belajar Kampus Merdeka program. This workshop will be moderated by Dr. Tony Dwi Susanto, PhD.
Okay, thank you.
For this session, Dr. Tony Dwi Susanto is a lecturer at the Department of Information System, Institut Teknologi Sepuluh Nopember. He obtained his bachelor's degree at Nuclear Engineering Department in Gajah Mada University. Then, he continued his master's degree at Electrical Engineering Department in the same university. After that, he pursued his doctoral degree at School of Computer Science, Engineering and Mathematics at the Flinders University of South Australia. He had also obtained some international certification such as TOGAF 9.1, COVID 5, and ITIL certification. He has had also other professional experiences, such as being an e-governance consultant for 5 cities in Indonesia, being the CEO and co-founder of PT Tata Cipta Teknologi Indonesia, becoming the chapter president of Association for Information System Indonesia chapter or ISINDO, and joining as an expert team member of data governance in BNSP in 2016. Without any further delay, let us welcome our moderator for this workshop, to Dr. Tony Dwi Susanto. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Okay, good day, ladies and gentlemen. This is very exciting for me to lead the discussion about the IS curriculum. Let me show the session for today workshop. So, yep, sorry. So this workshop will run into 2 sessions. We will have one session about the IS 2020 update, yeah. And then the second session will be about Merdeka Belajar startup session and how we relate the program of the Merdeka Belajar and startup from our national program into IS 2020. So as you know, in Indonesia, we have around 280 School of Information System, and there are still many questions about information system. Moreover, we still have many questions again about the curriculum for information system. So one references, global references, now we have the current references from the Association for Information System is called IS 2020. This is very interesting, and we really need this reference for our curriculum. So today we invite very important person who worked behind the IS 2020. Let me introduce Prof. Hannu Salmela. He is a professor of Information System Science at Turku School of Economic Finland. With the education background, he got his doctor from Turku School of Economic and Business Administration with major subject Information System Science. Information System Science. The research interest is IS strategy, about the IS agility, digital transformation, digital platform, and IS services, and IT project management. Sure, Prof. Hannu also have a long experience in professional experience as a AIS co-chair in the joint ACM ASIS 2020 curriculum task force. This is very important, co-chair, yeah, co-chair in the IS 2020 curriculum task force. So I'm sure Prof. Hannu really know about the detail of the IS 2020, and you can ask, yeah, any question about the IS 2020. And also Prof. Hannu, chairman of the Committee for Teaching Education of the Turku School of Economics, examiner and reviewer in 10 doctoral theses, and discipline head information system science. Yeah, and you can read here the award and honor of the Professor Hannu from the peer-reviewed science journal, conference article, and many others. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Prof. Hannu, yeah, to present for the update IS 2020 with 60 minutes for the presentation and later on 30 minutes for the question and answer session. Okay, please time yours, Prof. Hannu.
Well, thank you very much for the introduction, Professor Susanto. So as the introduction explained, I have a lot of personal interest on curriculum issues. So I used to be the Vice Dean for Education for 7 years, and even today I'm head of discipline, but I'm program head for our international multiple degree programs in information systems. So it is also a problem for me to think, how do I apply these guidelines in my work? But as it was explained, the reason why I'm presenting here is that it was about 3 years ago when we were able to apply for AIS was asking for co-chairs to volunteer, and I was elected, and then for 2 years I have been working with these guidelines and the task force to prepare them. And they have now been approved in last spring, both ACM and AIS approved, and now we have been still organizing events to like this a little bit. So I was very happy to get the invitation from Indonesia. I have visited it once a couple of years ago, and we visited some universities, and even there I noticed that you have taken full advantage of the previous guidelines. So you are an important community for these guideline committees, and that's why I'm very much looking forward to the discussion that we will have. But then let's move on to the actual topic and the IS 2020 guidelines. And let me start sharing. So perhaps you already know, but there is a long tradition for making these guidelines. So the first guidelines, and that was part of the AGM, I believe AIS was established a bit later. They started making these curriculum guidelines for different computing disciplines, and information systems as one of the computing disciplines has also been doing these. And there have been periodic updates quite frequently. So in fact, in this period between IS 2010 and IS 2020 is actually the longest one. And there has been a lot of things happening in information systems during this past decade. So probably it was a good time to start looking at whether the IS 2010 guidelines should be updated. And then for the presentation, so I was thinking that I was first start introducing the IS 2020, tell something about the background and principles of doing these guidelines, but then focusing a little bit on the things that we believe are new in the IS 2020, which is the move from courses to competencies. So rather than defining what courses should programs have, which still was the way to define IS curriculum in IS 2010, the focus is now more on what should the graduates, what kind of competencies should students have when they graduate from the program. And then for sure we will be taking a look at what remains, what kind of competency areas are there, and what are the ones that are pretty similar to IS 2010, but then also what kind of new competency areas we are now suggesting. And there is also the third difference is perhaps that we are trying to be more comprehensive or go more into detail of competencies. And as you can see from the report, there is a fairly long Appendix 3, which identifies a very large number of competencies and breaks them down to knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And that is also one difference. And as Professor Susanto said, perhaps this introduction could take about 60 minutes, and then we will have a possibility to discuss, and you can make questions and answers about the IS 2020, and we have also selected like 3 topics that we could discuss, but we don't have to limit to those 3 topics. But these are indeed also the topics of discussion are related to these new themes that we are proposing to be included in IS education and in IS curriculum planning. And how to contribute, I'm fine with you if you have some immediate question. I don't know if I can manage the raise hand function, because there's a quite good number of audience here. But I'm open to questions if they are related to the topic or comments. So even during introduction, so we don't have to divide this so strictly. But after the introduction, I will take a look at the chat and if there and I can, then we can discuss more generally briefly first about the guidelines, and then we can go to the discussion questions. Perhaps to try to commonly make sense about why we should do those things that the IS 2020 is kind of recommending, and how. And then if you have not downloaded the report yet, so it's available. We have used this is2020.org site, and I will of course be talking on a very high abstraction level. So if you want to take a look at it in detail, then the final version is now there in that site, or also in the ACM site, that you can see like where all the curricular recommendations are published on by ACM. So there is also the final report. So it might be good. We have been distributing sort of draft versions, but it would be good to rely on the final one now. Now this is the task force that we had. So I was co-chair from the AIS side, and from the ACM side we had Paul Leidig from Grand Valley State University in Michigan, the US, as a co-chair. so we too were leading the task force. And when we were also selecting members to this task force, and we tried to be like this. In the past, these have been very much US driven, and still about half of the members are from the United States. But we have also 3 members from Europe, Africa, and 2 members from Asia Pacific, and those would be Leslie Gardner from University of Auckland, New Zealand, and Venki Sankararaman from Singapore Management University. So it was we tried to be make it a global community. Since you have been using the previous guidelines, probably these are quite you know these quite well. But perhaps to emphasize the number 4 and 5, that the guidelines must be adaptable to most IS programs and not restricted to specific domain. Well, one of the challenges that when you start doing this is that IS programs currently, they are in computing schools, but they are also in business schools. Nowadays, there are many information management schools which used to be focusing on library science, and even in schools of medicine there can be IS programs. So some of the choices, which when you come from a single educational context, they may sound odd, but this may sometimes explain why we have to be quite general in providing guidelines. And yes, for the 6 we chose still, even in this context, we chose to have define the required competencies and elective competencies. So we are proposing a core that all IS programs should have in order for them to be called IS programs. And this is we tried to make this a very much a community effort. So we organized a lot of panels already before we released the report last December in ICIS conference. And as said, it was approved by ACM Education Board in February this year, and by AIS Council in March. But this was about the background of our work, and then if we move to the major changes, so this is one of the major changes is the move from courses to competencies, and in IS 22 and IS 2010, the curriculum was mainly represented by courses, like core courses and elective courses, and this was of course very handy and useful in many ways because it's easy to apply. But then starting from MSIS 2016, which provides guidelines for graduate programs in information systems, the move was already towards competency areas and competencies as a basic terminology or basic concept to be used in defining curriculum. And the CC 2020, which is providing guidelines for all computing disciplines, so not only IS, but also computer science, software engineering, and IT, and nowadays perhaps, well, they did not include data science, but looking at many disciplines, they are very much so the way we formulate competencies in IS 2020 is pretty much derived from the work of CC 2020 group, like this idea of competencies being being seen as requiring some knowledge and skills from students to apply that knowledge, and then the dispositions of the student, like the values that they have and the attitudes and those, so that they are able to perform the task well. So the competency, the definition of competency is related to a task, so that there is a task to be done, and the competency means that the student is or graduate is able to do the task, so that he or she has the knowledge and is able to apply, or sometimes it's enough to just remember or understand, but often it's like to apply or to evaluate or to create even new knowledge with the help of existing knowledge during the performing the task. So this is a basic terminology, and I have a couple of slides describing how we have so we can return to this. I think there are many reasons for and I don't know if it's completely new. I think in many courses the learning outcomes already have been like formulated as competencies, like what can a student do upon completion of the course, or what can he or she do upon completion of the whole program. I think there is still a little bit more ambitious objective of relating to what the student actually can do. And well, I think there are lots of reasons. I believe most of the students would appreciate if that they often have a question of, well, we know a lot, but what are the actual competencies that we have? So I believe they are quite happy. And also in industry, there is a lot of discussion about professional competencies, and they have work groups and task forces and organizations defining professional competencies related to different jobs. So I'm pretty sure they would welcome if we are also formulating our curriculum in terms of competencies. But the practical thing for curriculum guidelines is that they provide a lot of flexibility. So if we define that these courses must be taught in a program, it will be difficult for some programs perhaps to implement. So the number of courses that can be included in a program differs very much from business schools to computing schools to information schools, for instance. So it's also a flexibility issue of having this. But then if we move on to, and we will return to this a little bit at the end of the presentation by looking at some examples of actual how we define competencies. But then the second major thing is that in terms of contents, so is there any change from IS 2010 to IS 2020? And I think this is the image that most of us remember from IS 2010. It's a very good report overall. So there are lots of things, but this is what was seen in IS 2010 as being the core of IS programs, and these courses should be included in order to make it an IS program. But even IS 2010 and also MSIS 2016 and IS 2020 had this idea that those that were in the previous slide, they were information systems competencies, but they were also talking about individual foundational competencies and the significance of them. Like like teamwork competencies or presentation and communication competencies, analytic competencies, those kind of things, which are like individual competencies and that they are highly significant outcome of IS programs and they should be recognized as such. And we fully agree with that. So IS 2020, we didn't see much difference into, I don't think they are changing so much. But there is a possibility, of course, to say that in this coming decade, perhaps some other individual foundational competencies will become more important, but we didn't put a lot of change into those. And also the domain of practice competencies still remains. So the idea is that IS graduates should have some exposure to some used domain. So whether it's business in general, or nowadays we could talk about the finance industry, like the fintech programs, or marketing as domain of practice in digital marketing programs, and traditionally also healthcare is a specific domain of practice, and then the graduate should have some competency in one of the domain of practice competencies, so that it's easier for them to understand or be able to propose information systems as a means to improve operations in the use domain. And this is, of course, also sort of, there is no need to say that this is no longer valid. It definitely is. But then we come to the which probably will then be the main figure that will be remembered from IS 2020, and because this is the one that most explicitly talks about the contents of the program. And because we are now not talking about courses, we are talking about competency areas. So there are now a larger number of competency areas. And then in order to manage them, we have added a concept competency realm, so that we are saying that the programs can offer students with competencies in 6 realms: foundations, data, technology, development, organizational domain, and integration. And this is the highest level of thinking about how to profile our program, for instance. So how much do we want to have emphasis on different competency realms. And then in terms of competency realms, so within them there are required and elective competency areas, and the foundations is quite obvious, and it was already in IS 2010 as a course. So there are some information systems foundational competencies that students should get. Then in the data realm, we have the data information management, including databases, as one required competency area, and this was already in IS 2010. And then we have identified that nowadays there would be a possibility for electives in data business analytics, of course, involving also artificial intelligence, business intelligence, data mining, and all these new topics. And then data information visualization is becoming one possible elective. But the required one is the data information management. Then in technology, we have IT infrastructure as in 2010. But then we have added secure computing as a new, and this is the first one, which is like something new if compared to IS 2010. And given the well, I'm not going to go very much into details of why we added things, so they emerged in different panels. But I suppose it's intuitively nowadays the security issues are a major thing in internet. So it would be difficult to think that the graduates should not have the basic competencies related to security. For sure, there are lots of possible electives if a program wants to focus more on technology realm. Then more electives can easily be added. We added one, emerging technologies there. And the development realm has the systems analysis and design, which was already in 2010. But now we are also, many people talk about returning application development and programming into the required competencies, because it was in 2002, but it was removed in 2010. And here I believe that nowadays I kind of understand what the situation in 2008 and 2009 was such that perhaps this was not so critical. But nowadays, application development is again very much the companies are hiring software engineers and software developers and all kinds of companies, and so it's again quite critical to understand and get some exposure to how the programs are actually being designed. The organizational domain refers to the competencies of developing the use domain or developing business by using IT. And there we kept the IS management and strategy as the required. So how do companies manage the use of IT in their organization? But then we also added ethics, use, and implications for society, which refers to that nowadays the information systems are increasingly being used by everybody and by all citizens, and it's very important in public sector and all sectors of life, and it is becoming more important. So there are lots of ethical concerns, but also opportunities with IT to tackle many of the societal and global problems that we are having. So then this one would be the students should have some exposure and some competencies to in this area as well. And then we added business process management was already there, but then we added also digital innovation, which is perhaps more related to the fact that the information systems are often nowadays part of the value offering, the product and service that the organization is providing, and that means that it's coming closer to product development or service innovation, and that's why we added that one. For sure, there are lots of electives again in this domain that could have been included. So providing an exhaustive list of these is difficult. And then at the end we have the integration realm, where we have the IS project management with the idea that the project manager will have to be able to manage all these realms simultaneously. So it requires integration across the different realms. But then the IS practicum is also added, and this one is new, and it is more like giving a practical experience for students before graduation of applying all this knowledge. So getting a problem from a use domain and then thinking about the data and technology and issues and making the choices in developing the application. So this would be important way to integrate the knowledge that they have learned or the competencies so that they can apply those competencies. So this leads us to 10 competency areas that need to be covered. But as I explained earlier, it doesn't mean that we have to have 10 separate courses for each. So it is also a possibility to once we know the courses that we are going to teach, then these can sometimes it can be so that perhaps 2 competency areas can be successfully managed within a single course if there are not so many required courses or available. But it can also mean that if the program really wants to specialize in some realm and some competency area, then there can be more courses for a single competency area, which probably would be very useful. So, like always, it's not very easy to the teachers often feel that there would be a need for more time to focus on all topics when you start thinking what should be learned. Then in terms of what does it mean in traditional curriculum planning? So Professor Susanto already showed actually a better slide version of this, so perhaps we can use that one as well. But when I was thinking about how to explain this architecture, this was also my idea. So when you start using IS 2020 competency model, the realms are something that you think first at the very high level thinking. So would we like to focus more on data and use domain, or would we like to focus on competencies in technology, security, and development, for instance? So this is the way to look at the high level decisions. And then once these high-level decisions have been made, then it leads to a list of competency areas that you would like to include in your program. And then for each competency area, then there is the possibility to start looking at what kind of courses do we need to cover all the competency areas that we have. And then for instance, the competency area statements can be quite useful input for doing that. But as I was explaining, it does not have to be so that there is one course per one competency area, but it's genuinely a many-to-many relationship on both ends. And then once the courses have been and the course learning outcomes have been defined, reflecting the competencies, then for each competency or for each course learning outcome, the breaking down of competencies to knowledge, skills, and dispositions can assist in making the more detailed curriculum for the course, or a syllabus for the course and the plan on what kind of knowledge will a students get in the course, and what kind of exercises will give them skills to use the knowledge, and perhaps also even though we are not expected to talk about pedagogy, I think there are possibilities to think about if we know that this kind of a competency and the task related to it would require certain type of, like, whether there is a need for very innovative person or whether there is a need for very meticulous person, then also the teaching methods can be selected. So it goes quite into details. And then in terms of what kind of material we have, so in Appendix 3 we have defined the competency areas, and then even gone further down into the explaining the individual competencies. So as you can see from this slide, there is a competency area statement for each competency area. So this is for foundations of information systems competency area. So there is a brief explanation of what kind of competencies there are, and then there is a list of specific competencies. Like here it's identified that there are 8 competencies in this area. And as you can see, the competencies, it looks very similar to the learning outcomes. So we could even imagine that in the foundations course there would be this list of competencies. On the other hand, the foundational competencies are such that they probably, when the students graduate, they don't necessarily remember the foundations course anymore, but they probably will be able to do all this because these have been addressed also in many other courses. But still, this would be the way to use it in designing a course at the higher level. But then going into more detailed level, so defining an individual competency, there we have, like, this is for the first competency in foundations of information systems, and then this provides more detailed information about what this competency is about. And here first there are the key dispositions. So from CC 2020 they had identified a list of, I think, 11 dispositions, and then we simply used those dispositions and selected what kind of a person is able to do this competency. And then perhaps I don't go into details of why these 3 were chosen for this one, but for sure IS professionals in general need to be very independent. So encouraging students with exercises to sort of be self-directed, inventive, and purpose-driven sounds like a good choice. And then the knowledge elements is something like which is very traditional. So even in the traditional thinking of looking at knowledge areas and knowledge units and then defining learning objectives, the knowledge elements were there, and then we have identified for each competency a few knowledge elements, and then also associated them with skill levels. So those who are familiar with Bloom's cognitive level, well, that's what we used the Bloom's taxonomy to explain how high a student might get I think here in this slide, and when we go to the details, this is really like support or guide rather than to prescribe. So at the level of required competency areas, we would say that those are like strong recommendations, but here we end up having a lot of detail. And that's why it's more like support and guide rather than prescribe what should be taught in each course. And in general, one last comment is that as you notice, the report, the Appendix 3 is like 100 pages. So there are a couple of things that have led us to think, and we were also encouraged to think about how we could, is this the right thing that we have these task forces periodically updating the guidelines, or could there be more collaboration between universities and IS program heads and IS lecturers in defining what we should teach? And this is something that we have been thinking about, but we don't yet have. So the task force was still set to define, to make the report. So, but this is still an ongoing issue on how much we are going to try to move to this direction. It would make sense because nowadays we have all these tools, and this kind of a living document, at least in terms of the details, and perhaps periodic updates in the major choices could be a good target. Okay, so this one was my presentation. Don't see anyone putting anything on chat. Oh no, there is.
Okay, so for the organization committee, can you open the question? Okay, now this is first question, Prof. Hannu. I must admit that there is an intense debate on what is IS and what is not. However, under your opinion, under what situation a subject is not an IS enough? Can I say that data mining or algorithm scheduling is not IS because they are computer science? Can I say that human resource management and marketing is not is because they are of management? So that's basic question, the common question for IS and computing discipline in Indonesia. Maybe you can give your opinion, Prof. Hannu, please.
Yes. Is it possible that I share or go to my presentation, so it might be easier for me to?
Yep. Okay. Organizing committee, please. Yeah.
So I think if you look at this figure, so the data realms are such that there are specific programs for each of these. Like for data, we have data science and programs, and perhaps also business analytics programs, focusing solely on those. And then for technology, we have the IT programs and also for security, there are these cyber security programs. And then for development, there certainly is, I think it's central in computer science, but also software engineering programs are focusing mainly on those things. And then for organizational domain, there are these programs in marketing information systems or digital marketing and fintech and that kind of programs, which are looking at how to apply technology into into a specific industry or specific functions. And so the answer from IS 2020 is that okay, there is nothing wrong with profiling the program into one of those, but still the required competencies require that you have this end-to-end competencies, as it's sometimes called, so that the graduates, like I know from business school, many of them read IS as minor, and I can assume that even the fintech programs, they can perhaps ignore some of the data or infrastructure or secure computing or systems analysis and design programming, and perhaps also IS project management or IS practicum. They don't have that kind of combination of skills. Then in terms of more technical programs in computing schools, it is of course tempting to say that, well, IS programs are not needed, or they should somehow focus on some aspects, and if the program is in computing schools, it of course gives more synergy if the focus is on security or development or data. But I would still say that there is a need for more applied competencies, so that the persons that they don't just have the technical competencies, but they understand more about the organizational domain and how to improve it, and understand the use processes. And for the purpose that the more they have competencies to develop, and there are lots of like business analyst type of jobs and many jobs where the emphasis is more on discussing with the users on how to apply the technology, and they need this kind of profile. So then ignoring the IS management and strategy and ethics and use implications for society type of things, perhaps IS project management and IS practicum as well, means that then it does not really address the need in the industry of having these, well, they are sometimes called hybrid professionals, because they understand what the business people in the development team are trying to get, and also what the IT people and their way of thinking about how to develop these very complex systems, which they are nowadays. So that's why information systems is seen as having a balanced view of all these. Meaning, of course, that then we typically cannot go as deep as in those programs which are focusing solely on one realm from our perspective.
Okay, so by saying that, you mean that the difference between the IS alumni or IS professional compared to the, for example, computer science alumni is the IS student or IS alumni is a student or alumni when they apply the technology, they should also aware of the organizational domain and also integration domain. Is that correct? I'm trying to highlight.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And perhaps also a little bit broader perspective on the technology. So of course the computing disciplines are like they don't necessarily cover all these three domains: data, technology, and development, but rather focus on one of those. And we are trying to get a more balanced view. I think some of the ACM and the computing discipline guideline reports acknowledge that the IS is more cross-disciplinary also within the computing disciplines, and then it also has the exposure to business or whatever the organization domain is, and the attempt to manage the integration of all these to implement information systems in organizations to solve organizational problems with technology. So that's something that I believe has existed. This has been the core idea in information systems discipline all the time.
Okay. Is there any next question? Okay, you can show the committee, please show if is there any question. Okay, this is another question from Hatma. It's from Kumamoto University. I work as a lecturer in Information Technology Department in the Cyber Security Laboratory. In my faculty, we have both IT department and Information System Department. In the future, I have to prepare a unique cyber security curriculum for my student in the IT department to make it different from the security courses in IS department. My question are, what is the scope boundary of the cyber security courses in the IS curriculum? Then how should my department, IT, information technology, differentiate the cybersecurity courses for our curriculum? Okay, maybe your opinion, Prof. Hannu, please.
So at least, well, it's a specific one, so I need to.
Yeah, so in our university, there are two departments in a computing area: information technology and information system. In information technology, the focus in security. So the focus for the specialist capability is the security. They want to graduate a person who are really very good in security, IT security. Now becoming a question when we have a IS 2020, because security is also one of the competencies of the IS. So Pak Hatma, Mr. Hatma asks, so how can I differentiate about the curriculum between the security in his department, which is information technology specialist in security, and security in information system?
So I think in information technology department, the focus would be very much on computing security, and so the technological, how to technologically secure the IT infrastructure of a company, and all the technological tools, and I see it as so that would be the main emphasis in information technology department, because they have the interest on technical design of the infrastructure and of the systems and communications and so on, and it's a very huge area, and definitely in order to be very good cybersecurity professional, you have to have a lot of technical knowledge. Whereas in IS, I think first of all, as you noticed, there is this computing security is actually the one that was set as a required competency area. So for IS program, there would be a need to take some courses, or perhaps it would be a good idea to take some courses from IT department if it's possible. But then still the security or IS security has, there is this administrative security, like how to make sure that the users are behaving responsibly and understand the security requirements and all that type of aspects. Then there are also sometimes, which could have been added as an elective, there are these IT auditing functions, which are like, typically they are, at least in Finland, some of the major consulting firms recruit directly from programs people to do their IT auditing type of things. So there would probably be a lot of other courses which are more natural to provide in information systems department, and in general, I think, again, I would refer to, we don't have to go back to that figure, but I would say that there is even though there are more courses in security than in a general IS course, I would still recommend that there would be courses on data management and systems analysis and design and use domain phenomena. Like in a security program, you would probably use ethics and implications for society. It would be natural to talk a little bit more about privacy and data privacy and those kind of ethical things also related to why we need to have security in our systems. So I would say that there are definitely, and probably the information technology or IT department would be happy to have some courses from the IS program or the IS department program in terms of this administrative security. So how to make the users, how to make security policies that are effective, and how to organize the security education and that kind of things. So there is a possibility for collaboration, but at the end of the day, it's a question of what kind of jobs are out there. And I think there is a need for both jobs, so that there are jobs which require very high technical competence, and that's the only way to do it. But then there are also this kind of other types of security professionals, or like in Europe, we even have these. Well, as I mentioned, the IT auditor is another typical job title that could perhaps be more interested in this IS-oriented program graduates and then purely technical security.
Okay. Yep. So the point is, in the information technology department, it can be more technical, more technological, right? And then in the IS, because in a security domain, actually there are many aspects: the tool, the technological aspect, and also the governance, the management, even how to deal with the people, how to build the security culture, right? The risk culture, the security culture. So I think to highlight your suggestion is it can be the IT department work on more on the technical or technological aspect. Then in the IS is more on the governance, audit, management. But the IS student, they can take the courses of the technological aspect into on or from the IT department. Is that right, Prof. Hannu?
Yes, that would be the interpretation. So
okay,
it's always good to start from the job market and
okay,
and try to think about different kinds of professions that the graduates can have, and for sure, security needs different kinds of professionals with very advanced education. So I see a possibility for having two programs which collaborate, but still have a slightly different competency set at the end to meet different kinds of professional needs.
Okay, excellent. Another question? Okay, from Mr. Ivy Bisono. My department plans to spin off our IS program into 2 undergraduate programs. SIS has been already an applied science. I'm to find the red locus of the new undergraduate program, which must be seen as child of the IS. Can you share any strategy to find the red locus? Do you think IS can be spin off to more specialized discipline? Okay, so there are some program or school in Indonesia, they are trying to spin off the Department of Information System to be more specific department. Yeah. What do you think, Prof. Hannu? Is there any suggestion about the locus or the specialist for the new department under from the information system, not under from Department Information System?
Well, I think we would then go back to, and we don't have to go to the figure, but I would say that by combining the realms somehow, it could lead to two IS programs which have a slightly different aims in terms of competency areas to cover. If I look at our program, which we are in business school context, so when I look at our undergraduate program, we have a lot of courses on how to develop the use domain, which makes sense because we are offering a minor as well. So we have courses for students majoring in accounting and finance and marketing and management and so on. So then we have a lot of courses there. And the second thing that we cover very much is the data. So that well, of course we teach Excel, but we also have a course on business intelligence, and even when teaching Excel, we are covering a lot of practical skills in how to get data from relational databases to Excel and how to visualize the presentations and so on. So and even do some programming, like programming the macros. Is it still Visual Basic or something? But still, it's like those two appear to be quite easy to combine, because now, if you think about what marketing is about, it's very much data analytics anyhow. And then the artificial intelligence is there is a project at the moment set up by AACSB, which is a management curriculum for a digital era MACUDE, it's called. It is organizing events. It has some company funding even. So it's a big question in when we look at the use domains to look at how this artificial intelligence is going to influence the different domains. So putting the data and the use domain competencies together and making a program focusing on that could be one of the two programs, and then the other one could be more focused on development, so that there would be, of course, systems analysis and design, but looking at also, of course, agile methods and all those things, and have some programming, and perhaps also looking at infrastructure and security things a little bit more closely, so that, and this would be like the first one would focus on business analyst type of competencies, and the second one would focus more on systems analyst and systems developer or application developer type of competencies. So yes, in general, I think there is a lot of variation in between IS programs in terms of specialization, so that the IS, there already are probably already these more specialized disciplines or specialized IS programs. So very few are like generalists in the sense that they would try to cover all all competency realms equally, and I don't see any problem. So what we are saying, IS 2020 group is saying is that still it would be good to have coverage of all these required competency areas. So we should remember that when the students come to IS programs, they typically don't have much pre-knowledge on the topics that are being covered. So they start from scratch, and one way to look at the required competency areas is to look at them as if we don't know where the student, what kind of job the student will get, what are the competency areas that he or she will still need regardless of the specific job, whether it's a business analyst or security professional or any professional. So that they are not necessarily the most important ones, but they are they provide the foundation for different professions, for different IS professions.
Okay. Prof. Hannu, we still have 8 questions from the audience. So
so I need to answer shortly.
Yeah. Sorry. I will pick a different person, who asked the question. Please, from the committee, you pick a different person to ask. Okay, from Yugantara, from the International University of Semen, Indonesia. Okay, regarding this IS 2020 curriculum, our university have updated the curriculum in July, and it's been implemented for 2 semesters in our university. The curriculum is the second update from its first established in 2015, and we need to update to face new academic year on August 2020. We have included the competencies based on IS 2020, but only from its document draft on August 2020. Is there a need to update it from the final version of IS 2020? Any recommendation from you how to approach it, since we can't just directly change the structure of our curriculum in the middle of its implementation? So the point is, they have adapted the draft, Prof. Hannu, the draft on August 2020. So please suggest what is the difference between the final and the draft. If they adapt from the draft on August 2020, is there anything that they need to modify or change? Okay, please.
So, well, luckily for you, I think internally how we worked was that we actually had 2 real panels in 2019, and there we discussed what are the required competency areas, and then we defined them in the beginning of 2020, that these are the required competency areas. So even the draft in August 2020 had the final required competency areas, and then the last fall term 2020, we were more working with the appendices, like defining the competencies within each competency area, and we did not change, as far as I remember, we did not change the required competency areas anymore. The only thing I think in the beginning, the IS practicum was sometimes referred as elective and sometimes as required, and at the end we defined it as required competency area. So in practice it means that there should be, at least in some course, there should be some exercises giving a group of students. Well, there are many ways to do it, but sort of this kind of applied exercise, like a capstone, as it's sometimes called, to deliver something and to apply the knowledge. But that would be and I think it was like IS practicum was there all the time. So this would be the only difference that I know. Of course, I don't remember exactly all the drafts,
Okay.
but I believe you are very close to the final.
Okay, so there is no significant difference, yeah. There is no, as you know, remember that there is no significant difference between the draft on August 2020 and the final, right? There is no significant.
No, not in terms of the major choices.
Okay.
So we were of course trying to ask the all, but I think that the already in the 2020 draft,
Mhm.
the required areas were quite well received by the panels that we had after that. So
Okay, thank you. So, okay, next question, please. From Endang. This is from the University of Nahdlatul Ulama, NU, Surabaya. On this IS 2020 competencies model, it is stated that there are two competencies which are required and optional. What are the implications of each competencies area on formation of courses in curriculum structure? Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah, about the competencies and related with the courses. So because in the competencies there is a optional and required, obligatory. So how is to implement it into courses? Please, Prof. Hannu.
So the idea is that the required competency areas are such that they should be included in some courses. So they are like, well, I perhaps I emphasize that the guidelines are there to guide but not to prescribe. So of course there is some that they can be mindfully applied, but the idea is that the 10 areas that have been defined as required, that there should be some, the students should get some exposure to those and some level of competency in those competency areas. What it exactly means then in terms of do all the competencies listed under each competency area, do they have to be there? But that is a different thing. But the big idea is that those 10 competency areas should be there. Then the elective competency areas or the optional ones are then for thinking about specialization or profiling the program or perhaps providing a specialization in or career track even in one of the areas, and those are then perhaps just optional. So there is no need to try to include the optional competency areas to a single program, because that would simply be difficult. So it's more a choice based on how you want to profile the program.
Okay.
And then in terms of accreditations are sometimes mentioned. So as far as I know, AACSB does not really go into very much details on the contents of that. They have these 15 standards, but it's not so much on the, so I don't know if they would be starting to look at IS 2020 contents. ABET, on the other hand, has a specific list of courses that needs to be included, and we try to make sure that our list, our required competencies are compatible with the ABET accreditation requirements in terms of contents of IS programs.
Okay. Yep. We go to the next question. Yeah. From Intan Zikria, PhD. This from Surabaya University. 17 August, Surabaya University. It's interesting, Prof. Hannu. It's always asking the quantitative things, yeah, the number. How many percentage that the IS program should have in terms of the technological competencies area? So it will not going to be too close to computer science program or even to the business program. It's a common question, Prof. Hannu. What is your opinion or maybe suggestion?
Well, since we have like it is a combination of computer science program and a business and accounting program, or I don't know what BA, but business program. In any case, so that there is the use domain and the for business program and perhaps the technical and security and development aspects, typical in CS programs. So I think based on the IS 2020, I think the required competency areas is the answer, and that will lead to it depends, of course, on what the CS programs and BA programs are like, but I think there is a clear difference for BA program. I think it would be more likely to have over 50% to be IS specific and BA part be less than 50%. But then for CS program, it depends on how it's profiled. But I would still say that perhaps in order to cover all the required competency areas, you will end up having like more than 60 to 70% can be similar, but still you would definitely need 30 to 40% to cover those topics that are not typically in CS program. And even then it would be very sort of CS profiled IS program. But I don't know if there are these percentages that you can easily give.
Okay, I think I will give opportunity for the audience to ask question. I will give to speak directly. Maybe Bu Mahindra. Bu Mahindra, can you speak directly about your question, please?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Prof. Hannu, for your sharing. Our department have learned a lot about this evolution of the competency models, but at the end of the day, it is just a guideline, right? So my question is probably a bit extreme. I'm just wondering who actually is the main users of this such model. I mean, is it the course provider like us, or the students, or the industry that use the graduates of IS program? Because we spend a lot of time to differentiate between IS, computing, etc., especially in Indonesia, when in reality, while the competency model itself is really clear on the differences, at the end of the day, the course provider made the decision based on the capability and interest of their resources. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is the worst thing that can happen if none of us is actually following this model? Thank you.
Okay, please, Prof. Hannu.
Well, I think I know that there is a kind of an accreditation system, or probably a very good one within Indonesia. So then one of the users of this kind of reports, if they are accrediting IS programs, they probably know that AIS and ACM is providing these guidelines. So it is likely that they will take a look at the guideline report, and even though it's meant to guide and not prescribe, it is of course an advantage if it's aligned with what the discipline, the global organizations of the discipline have approved as being a good IS program. And in general, I think there are lots of inputs to curriculum design, as you said, mentioned, that the resources and the local job markets and also the other disciplines with which the program can collaborate to provide courses. So there are lots of inputs, and those are, of course, valid still. So it's not like a question that now the only input is the IS 2020 report.
Oh, yeah.
But it's still one useful input to, and I believe most evaluators, when they evaluate the curriculum planning process, they do make the question of how did you look at the opinions in the discipline in general, and then if you can make an explicit reference. If you then say that you deviated from some of the recommendations because of good reasons, I don't think your program will not be accredited. But it's of course the accrediting body to do it. In general, when we write the guidelines, we are thinking about many stakeholder groups like the deans of the schools, and of course program heads and teachers are the primary customers or users, but I believe it's also the students and the faculty in other disciplines who often don't really know that much about IS, and the deans and the administrators, and definitely then the companies and recruiters and so it's a long list of stakeholder groups that we hope this report would reach, but can't be sure if that will happen.
Okay.
Okay, it's answer, Bu Mahe.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I can ask one more question if you don't mind.
Yes.
I mean, compared to, I don't know your experience. Is it really that important to differentiate between, IS, computer science and information technology, where in the end, when they work, they actually work in a team, like it's a cross function, if I can say, to solve a problem. None of them can work on its own to solve the problem. So when in the end we want to have this so-called collaboration, so why does it matter so much when this is teaching this and the other is teaching this? And so what I'm trying to say is how important it is to really differentiate between this so-called body of knowledge.
Okay.
I think this discussion we in the panels we often got this question, and I think it's a little bit more increasing. Of course, the computer science and software engineering programs, they have also recognized the need for individual foundational competencies, so all these presentation skills and teamwork and that kind of things. And if you think about the agile methods, for instance, they are in the same agile team. They are the computer scientists and users, and they have to communicate. So in the past, when we had the waterfall model, there were different people doing the requirements analysis, and then different people doing the implementation in terms of defining systems requirements and computer and coding, so that the professions were like easier to separate. And I think always it has happened so that students from computer science programs, so those who have a more applied perspective or who have more interest on managing projects, they end up, or even in software engineering, they don't necessarily end up being engineers, but they end up being sales support or sort of more business oriented type of jobs. So then they just have to learn So when they go to industry, their education gives them some competencies, but then the rest of the competencies they have to learn while they are working in the profession. So for students, it's very difficult to say that there is an IS job because most of the jobs are such that also other people qualify to those jobs if they have the required competencies. But then we as educators, because we know that there is the need for this kind of specific set of competencies, which sort of balance the use domain and all the benefits for the users and then the technical implementation of the system. So then it makes sense that we still have slightly different programs with rather than just having a single program for all. I think there is good that we have this diversity inside the computing disciplines, because I guess otherwise we could also start questioning why do we need programs in data science, or why do we need cybersecurity? Can't we just have one program and that's it? So
okay, Prof. Hannu.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bu Mahid, and thank you, Prof. Hannu. So I think we need to go to the next topic. It's about Merdeka Belajar, Prof. Hannu. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think you can read in detail about the IS 2020. I think the document is very detailed and complete. You can read also the appendix. So I'm sure you can use the IS 2020 as a guidance for developing the curriculum, especially the step on developing the program learning outcome. Program learning outcome. You can find detailed guidance on the IS 2020. Okay, the next session, as I said,
there's one thing that I would like
no
to
worries.
point out, that we are organizing workshops on how to, and the next workshop is actually next week in AMCIS. So if any of you is participating in AMCIS, there will be a workshop which is like, we are inviting people to come there to sort of, with the idea that how to apply IS 2020 to design your own program. Or there will be also a possibility for those who are not designing program but designing own course. So then the idea is, I think, of course, you probably can read the report yourself, but discussing with other people in the workshop could be quite useful. And there is a SIGET conference before ICIS in December, so there may be a similar workshop, and also in HICS in Hawaii, Information Systems Conference, there may be a workshop. So you are all invited to join.
Okay, so in the workshop we can ask how to tailor the method in Indonesia using the IS 2020, Prof. Hannu, I think.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we are going to go to the next topic. It's about Merdeka Belajar. Let me give you a short about the explanation about the Merdeka Belajar. So Merdeka Belajar is a program in Indonesia. This is a program, sorry, I will just go directly to, just go directly to the Merdeka Belajar here. Here is the Merdeka Belajar. Yep. So Merdeka Belajar, or in English, is a freedom of studying. This is a national policy in Indonesia, Prof. Hannu. This is obligatory for all the university in Indonesia. Every university, they have to provide at least 3 semesters. For what? First, one semester for a student to take a subject in a different school, different program, or even different university, 1 semester, and that is 20 credits. And the university should also provide two semester for the student to learn by experience, So it's around maximum 40 credits, two semester. And the real problem solving experience can be 8 options of the activities. First is the field job, job field. So they work on the office, they work on the real industry. They go to the office starting 8 until 4 from Monday up to Friday. Or they can also work in the suburb. They can work in the village. So they do some social work, working together to solve a problem, real problem in the village. And the third, they can also teach in school. So the student can teach in the school, especially in the suburb areas, when they need more lecturers or teachers. And the fourth, it can be a student exchange. So they can also learn by study in the different universities, especially international university. And the fifth option, they can also do experience learning by doing some research, with the real research with the lecturers or even any researchers in the world. And the sixth, they can also do activities as entrepreneur. So they can run business, business, because in Indonesia, as this subject as well, this topic subject as well, that the government also encourage student or youngster to develop startup to improve their entrepreneurship spirits. So the sixth option is entrepreneur activities. The seventh option, they can also organize independent project. So if they have some idea to do some project, then they can also propose the project to the lecturers, to the program. If it is accepted, then they can run the project and claim the project as a subject, as courses in the department. And finally, they can also have an option to do humanitarian project, so social project, humanitarian project. For example, they work for the NGO, they work for any social organization. So there are at least 6 options for the student for 2 semesters, to change the subject, change the course into real experience, real works experience. But the notes here is all of these activities or the program should be approved by the school. So it cannot just student just do something, did something, and then suddenly they come to the program, said, look, I got this experience, I want this experience changing this course. No, they have to propose the program first in the early of the semester, then to the lecturer and to the school, then the school will approve it, and then there will be 2 supervisors. First supervisor is from the university, the second supervisor is from the organization where they work. And then they can take the program for maximum 2 semesters and maximum 40 credits. So now the discussion is, from your opinion, is how we can do it using maybe related with the IS 2020 curriculum. And I think I spot one competencies there, that is IS practicum, right? IS practicum. Maybe, or I have no idea, maybe there are other options in IS curriculum to accommodate about the freedom of the study here, program here, and also about the startup program in our national government program. Okay, please, Prof. Hannu.
Yes, IS practicum is probably the competency area, which, because I think in all forums that you are you were describing, they are kind of, the purpose is that they are also applying the knowledge that they have learned in other courses when doing this. Sounds a little bit like sometimes in some of our programs we have compulsory internship. So then and it has similarities, but I think also in the technical programs of our university we have the capstone. It's on the graduate level or the in the engineering programs, but it looks very similar, and I think this kind of modules are really good in any program, so they serve many purposes. I think the way IS 2020 defines the IS practicum, it kind of assumes that there is a development task to be associated, like that. It is a little bit closer to like if they become entrepreneurs and start developing and like digital entrepreneurs. So then it looks very much like a practicum. And I think there were also other forms, but if they are serving as teachers, then it may be that it's not exactly like IS practicum. And I know from experience that also with capstones we have some difficulties because you need a lot of assignments or to get enough assignments for students. So not all are like ideal capstone cases. And I guess also in this case, but as long as it sort of serves the purpose of, and even if they are teaching, if they are teaching IS topics, so probably they are applying what they have learned already there. So then even those can be considered. But of course, if you if you don't want to have this kind of tensions, then it's also possible to if you have a course on systems analysis and design or programming, that you have a smaller team exercise included there, and then you don't have to try to get the capstone to to be exactly the IS practicum equivalent. But in general terms, that if an IS program has this kind of a module, I think it is very close to being complying the IS practicum requirement in any case. So of course it's understandable that they are working with individual assignments. But for instance, this third sector or sort of being involved in some community work sounds like a very good IS practicum practice as well. Of course, it's always important what is required from them. How do they report, and how are the activities planned, and how are they reported? So that's of course always when you have an internship, that those are very, very important. So that it's not just working there and coming back and getting credits, but really what you described already, that there is a faculty member and the company representative, and there is a discussion on but I believe these kind of modules are really good, and in fact when the IS 2020 guidelines, as I said, we were like, well, this IS practicum is difficult to implement, and should we have it, and that kind of discussions. But when AIS Council approved this in March, somebody asked the question of why did you include IS practicum, and then then we explained it, and then the comment was, well, I'm very glad you did include it. So So I guess it's one of those things where we are encouraging IS programs to move to that direction that you are taking, that there should be some practical exercises which rely on the students' self-initiative to work in group or work in a context.
So that's the motivation, yeah, behind the competencies of IS practicum, yeah, because I think actually because in our opinion in IS 2010 actually without IS practicum implicitly that students should learn by themselves and maybe do some practices. So what actually the difference in the concept of the IS practicum in IS 2020? So it should be explicitly becoming one competencies that make different with the IS 2010.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's related to being able to combine the knowledge from different realms and apply it in practical tasks. So when you look at it and think about it, they learn very diverse things in different courses. So then and then of course it's very important to build these individual foundational competencies like presentation skills and teamwork and all those. So it's a very useful component.
Okay. So I will open the opportunity for the question again to the participants. So again, if we still have a time later on, we will also look at the previous question. So you can ask any question related to the information system curriculum and also related with the Merdeka Belajar as well. So please committed to show the question. Any question, please? I will give opportunity. You can ask directly, yeah. Pak Kristadi Asabakti, do you mind to ask directly? What are the steps in order to fulfill all? Pak Kristadi? Okay, so I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tony.
Yep.
And Mr. Hannu. Question is, what are the steps to fulfill expected from IS 2020? How to start? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes. I think up until now we have been discussing about new programs when we start from scratch developing new programs, and then it's perhaps easier to see how that the IS 2020 can provide guidance. But in most cases we start from an existing program, and and then the question is that do we meet the IS 2020 requirements? And then this is also so I think the concrete thing to do is to look at the contents. So what I have been thinking in my own program, we have biannual study plans. So we plan the curriculum for 2 years at a time, and we have to do the next 2-year plan during next winter. So then I have been thinking that I will ask my teachers to either identify the few most important competencies that their program is giving, or alternatively I'll ask them to do a gap analysis of looking at because I know which courses should cover which competency areas, so then they can do the gap analysis perhaps by themselves. so that we would address all the required competencies, or if we don't, then we at least make an explicit decision or an argued decision why we are not doing it immediately. Of course, I have been looking at it also by myself, but it is a curriculum planning cycle, which is of course very important in terms of that. And I think we can then also discuss about the elective courses and which then are the elective competency areas, that what are the ones that we are willing to include in our program. As we are in business school, we don't have many in undergraduate program. We have very few. It's about 25% is major and 75% is something else. So we have to be very selective. But then hopefully with the help of IS 2020, we can make more informed choices on what we then define as required, and what is then defined as elective contents. In terms of then the move towards competency thinking in curriculum design and perhaps in teaching more broadly, then that is of course a long journey. So I don't know if there are any steps. It's just that people start appreciating this kind of thinking and even, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe related with the question from the Asabati.
Yes.
As maybe we have discussed before, that the method for formulating curriculum in Indonesia is like the right side, yeah, from the alumni profile, program learning outcome, learning statement, courses, decided process, and finally the position of the courses. Maybe in your opinion about the mapping of the curriculum architecture in IS 2020, yeah, or the any artifact or any object in the IS 2020, what is the object or artifact in IS 2020 that can be applied in the step in curriculum, formulating curriculum in Indonesia? First, we starting from the alumni profile. We do some survey about what our alumni has worked, so we understand which of the job index that we will choose as our target for our alumni. And then after the program study, we pick 3 or 5. Then finally, we try to identify the competencies of the job index in terms of the knowledge, skills, and the disposition. And then after that, we are trying to learn, identify the topic or the learning statement to achieve the competencies. Then after that, we classify all the learning statement into courses. Then we know, okay, so we need these courses. The content of the courses is the learning statement, and we can define the credit, yeah, for every courses, maybe 2, 3, or 4 credit based on number of the learning statement we define. Then after that, we define the position of the courses, whether it will be the first semester, second semester, or even it can be optional courses, something like that. Now, your suggestion related with the IS 2020, we have known some definition there. There is a competencies area. There is any others. There is realism and others. So how can, or which one that can be applied or mapping into this step in Indonesia?
So I think for alumni profiles, There is Appendix 1 in IS 2020, which is like looking at typical jobs where IS graduates end up, and then it's mapping those jobs into the required and elective competency areas. So that is of course a one input for thinking about which of the competency realms should we be focusing, or what would be an appropriate profile in our considering our local job market and the job placement of our graduates and alumni. So that would support that stage. And then depending on what the profile is, then that would, I don't know if we would necessarily go into knowledge and skills, and well, I think that the competency areas is the thing that we are working on, so that we upon completion of the program, the student has very advanced level knowledge on data and analytics and visualizing information, for instance, if that is decided, so that it would be more on competency areas. So the terminology in IS 2020 at that level is more on competency areas, and then we start. When we go to the courses, then we start looking at, okay, well, if there is a course on computing security, for instance, so then there is a list of competencies, which would then sort of inform what exactly is what kind of competencies are there in computing security, and then we move to. So each competency is then described as requiring some knowledge and skills to apply that knowledge in some computing security tasks, and also certain types of dispositions are needed, like perhaps in security we would need people to be meticulous and reliable and that kind of thing. So it's not like going directly, but on the other hand, I believe it's possible still to define program learning outcomes also to separate the knowledge and skill and dispositions there as well, because probably depending on what competencies are needed, so also there is a general idea of what knowledge and skills and dispositions to those competencies or competency areas will require.
Okay. Yep. So that's how we mapping use or utilize some aspect or recommendation from the IS 2020 into step of the IS curriculum formulation in Indonesia. Okay, thank you Pak Asa ya. So okay, next question. Next question, please. So the next question. Yep, Pak Tristianto. Pak Tristianto, are you still join? Can you just ask your question directly to Prof. Hannu? Pak Tristianto from University of Lampung. Lampung is another island, Prof. Hannu, next to the Java Island.
Okay.
Pak Tristianto, are you still there? Yeah. Okay, Pak, please, Pak. Is there any connection? Pak Tristianto, I see you there. Is that okay for the connection?
Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, you can start now.
Professor Hannu, when we define the curriculum or a course, then we set some hours to take some practice for the students. And in IS 2020, can you tell me about the guidelines? How much percentage for the students to take the practical skills, and then rather than the just like general knowledge for the bachelor degree?
Okay, so the point from Pak Tristianto is there any guidance which one is should be or better using the practical practical work, practical skill rather than knowledge? Is there any clue or guidance in IS 2020, Prof. Hannu, for the competencies, or for the any guidance there that, oh, this is better if you use the practical work, and this is enough using the knowledge level in the class? Okay, please.
I think the competency thinking kind of, I think this is very core question of what is new in competency thinking. So that when we start thinking about competencies that the students should have upon completion of a program, then we don't differentiate these anymore that clearly, so that we see the knowledge as necessary for competencies, and then the ability to apply the knowledge is then the skill development in a sense. So I would say that typically if we start thinking about what competencies should the students have, then it reduces if we don't think about competencies, but we think about knowledge areas and knowledge units, and then define learning objectives, then we typically have a lot more knowledge in the courses, whereas then it's more goal oriented, so that we want students to learn the competencies, and it is not so much anymore a question of what we teach, what kind of knowledge we give to the students, but it's more like helping the student to gain the competence that is required, and also the student may be asked to find knowledge. So in that sense, the competency thinking kind of tries to avoid distinction between practice skill development, because all practice skill development requires knowledge, and on the other hand, all knowledge the students should be able to apply it and use it for specific tasks. So it's more a different kind of thinking. But then when I think about undergraduate programs and undergraduate studies, for sure it's not easy to say that we can. There are still some knowledge areas which sound very useful, and which may be difficult to tie into specific competencies or competency areas. So this is something that when I was thinking that was steps to take in implementing IS 2020, I think this idea of competencies is something that each teacher either accepts or doesn't accept. But it requires some thinking about about in terms of in the context of own courses on how to implement it.
Prof.
Again,
Hannu,
I don't have a clear answer on the
Mm,
percentage. Of course, it could be,
uh,
but I believe some of the, if you look at the so the thing to do is there is this Appendix 3 in the
yeah.
IS 2020
Mm.
report, and there you can see that some competencies really are listed as having remember or understand type of skill level, and then it kind of means that then it's very knowledge oriented, whereas then to apply, analyze, evaluate, and create, it typically refers to an exercise. The teacher gives a task and the student has to do something with the knowledge they have. So and then these are more skill levels. Like if you think about a course on Excel, you probably don't need that much knowledge on Excel as such, or something to understand and remember. It's more like being able to apply to do the exercises that the teacher gives with Excel. But I don't have a clear percentage. In general, I think we started from very knowledge oriented programs. Like when I studied, we had big course books and we studied and learned a lot of knowledge, but had very little skills to do. So we are perhaps moving more towards increasing the number of skill oriented courses and perhaps reducing the knowledge oriented. But whether there is a percentage that I don't think I am in a position to say any clear percentage.
Yeah, but I think, Prof. Hannu, I found also the Appendix 3 at least can give a small clue, yeah, at least give me some clue. Like, for example, Pak Tristianto, if the subject, for example, pick the level of the learning outcome is apply, for example, apply or even to create, yeah, then I think it will need work practices rather than just activities in the class. You can read in the Appendix 3. It's very detailed here. It says, for example, for the competencies, classify the component, element, operation, and impact of the IS, and the knowledge element. This is very detailed here. It should be touch about the component of IS, and the skill level is just understanding is enough, yeah, from here. But then this is interesting. When come to the operation of IS, then it should be applied, for example. And there is other component that need have competencies in create, yeah, to create. That is the highest, I think. I think it can be also can be a guidance, right, Prof. Hannu, to giving some suggestion to the program whether it needs some work practices, or it can be just doing in the class with the lecture. Is that correct? We use this Appendix 3 as a guidance.
Yes. Actually, Appendix 2 is also a planning tool. Before we go into so at the program level, we could take a look at these different competencies under competency areas, and then try to think whether it's enough to just understand or remember, so that you don't necessarily need to be able to apply it. And then this could be used between the program head and the teacher to discuss about whether how far you might want to go in terms of different competencies, and this I would say, at least in MSIS 2016, there is a sentence saying that if you want to reach higher levels, then you need to have some student doing some practical exercises, doing the task, and apply the knowledge to the task. So, and for levels, remember and understand, and then it's sufficient to just read and perhaps have an exam or some other kinds of tests to make sure that they understand the knowledge.
Yep.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you,
Yep.
Mr. Ron.
Okay, thank you, Pak Tristianto. Yeah, I think we can read on the Appendix 2 and 3. Yeah, it also gives some guidance, some clue. Okay, makasih. Thank you, Pak
Yeah.
Tristianto. So next question. Please Pak Munglason. Yeah. Okay, Pak Munglason, please. You can ask directly, Pak Munglason. Pak Munglason, yeah. Sakson. Sakson still with us? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Pak Tani. Professor Hannu, I just wondering the reason why technical things that's in IS 20 and 10 is elective and now become core competency or required competencies. Can you elaborate more? Thank you very much.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So please, Prof. Hannu, why now
Well,
the programming practicum becoming obligatory now?
So I think immediately after the IS 2010 was released, there were many articles criticizing because there are, of course, I think mainly in computing schools, there are programs which are sort of quite technically oriented in general, and these program heads and faculty felt that it was a mistake to leave the technical application development out from required competencies. Then there has been, I think it's mainly in the US, but there has been a concern or from industry managers saying that graduates do not have the required technical skills. So there would be a need for more technical skills from IS graduates. So there was an exploratory committee before our task force started to work with it, and then it was more or less given to us that this matter should be addressed. So,
All right.
So, and I think also in terms of the composition of task force, there were many of those who felt like very strongly on having the technical competency as a required competency.
Yep.
But then on the other hand, me coming from a business school environment, so I could probably be considered as a person who should object having technical competencies and practicum. But if I look at the discussion at the business schools in general, there is a lot of discussion on whether we should have programming at some level for all business school students. So then, and I think there are valid arguments also for that. So that in 2010, I think there was a lot of interest on ERP systems and perhaps some other topics, but it was not like we did not yet have the analytics, which is often developed inside the company, and we did not have all this digital transformation taking place, so that the product of the company has a significant software component. And then even if it's a traditional manufacturing company or financial sector company, and then they just need these people who also understand the technical implementation. So of course, I don't think many IS, of course, there will be very IS programs which profile themselves very close to computer science programs, and then they provide all these programming courses that are now listed as electives so that they are capable perhaps of starting as programmers. But most of the IS programs do not go that deep into but that they have a thorough understanding of how to change the business problem into a systems development problem, and how to implement the system so that they understand and understand also the programming and that kind of knowledge. I also sincerely believe that we should provide to our students. As far as I know, none of our alumni works as a programmer. Some of them have said that they were put to do programming in a consulting company, but then both the employer and themselves decided that it's better to do something else. So it's not like that we start educating programmers. I don't see that as but I think this exposure to what programming is and how it's done and all this, I think it's a good exercise to actually try to implement the program. So I believe the students will value that. Although I do recognize also there is also a lot of discussion on gender issues that we would need to have more female students, and I have been involved in many when the students choose their major when they are already in business school, and many girls in the past used to ask, do we have to learn what programming? So it was something that they were afraid of. But I think even this is nowadays changing a little bit. So I don't think I don't see that being an issue anymore to that scale. I think the young generations understand that they are used to having using the digital technologies so much in their lives that they are more curious on how it's done rather than being afraid.
Okay, Pak Mulason, is there any more?
Yeah, I think it's quite clear. Thank you very much. I think
Okay.
this is very interesting issues.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Hannu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Hannu. So it's about the requirement, yeah, from the industry, yeah. So the programming competency now come up as a compulsory, yeah. And if we see from the Appendix 2, ladies and gentlemen, you can check on the participant on the Appendix 2. Actually, it also gives us detail about the recommendation for the level of the competencies, yeah. There are many levels just apply, but also there are, at least in programming, there are three tasks that should be create level, the top level, that is develop the programming code implementation that realize the system architecture and design. It should be the top level, that is create, yeah, to create, not just apply, not just understanding, but create. And then test all develop programming code component to ensure consistency and fit. It's also create, yeah. And then establish and maintain the appropriate dialogue among stakeholders and ensure the degree of communication, information transparency, and maintain the availability of the software system. It's also create level. That's the top level. And I think now it's becoming clearer, yeah, compared to the IS 2010. So whatever our background, whether business background or technical or computer science background, now we should accept this recommendation. We have to be prepared to achieve, yeah, this recommendation level. It's interesting. It's good. Okay, next question maybe. Yeah. Okay, next question. Yes, from Politeknik Negeri Malang, ya, Pak Afif Indrawan. I think, are you willing to ask directly, Pak Afif?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Pak Tony.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Hannu. I think my question is already answered by Mr. Tristianto question before, so I think it's enough. Thank you.
Okay, so yep, no worries. Wait, just back to the Pak Afif. Prof. Hannu, in Indonesia, we have a vocational based education, and we have a what is called like academic based education. The vocational based education is like a polytechnic in German, yeah, in Europe system. So in your opinion, can the IS 2020 or how to use the IS 2020 used for vocational based education? Not the or is there any differences in order to use the IS 2020 for the vocational based education like polytechnic, like something like that, compared to the university education? What do you think?
Well, that's a good question. Of course, we were mainly looking at the undergraduate IS programs, or that was the starting point.
Yeah, that's
but
the tricky situation in Indonesia, because even undergraduate, we have a undergraduate vocational, it's vocational, but we have yeah.
But somehow I think this, like indeed, if you just start looking at, or I think at least here in Europe there is a lot of discussion on kind of lifelong learning, so that we should also be able to provide modules for those who are already in work life and want to update their knowledge. And I think this competency thinking in general is like, it fits quite well actually, rather than having this degree-based thinking and focusing more on providing knowledge. So then these competencies are, or even though I would say that it's not exactly the same competencies that are the professional competencies that people in professional jobs have, and in education the tasks are more the tasks given by teacher, whereas the tasks in real life are given by the company. But it's still task based, so I see it easier to relate to the vocational based, and then often people may feel that, okay, I would need to learn more about computing security. So if there is a computing security area and we are able to teach computing security with a competency type of thinking, then probably that is more attractive to those who are doing the studies, a part of their job. And then also, even though, of course, then probably if we think about, like, we have also the applied science universities, and which are like not trying to get to the scientific level, then I would assume that still I think they can inform design of vocational based programs and curriculum design there as well. So it can be useful, but can't really say how much there is a need to deviate still to meet the student expectations and industry expectations about the level of competencies.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So that's Pak Afif, Prof. Hannu. So I think the point is usually the vocational based education is more oriented to the task, yeah, or some specific what is it, job, yeah, specific level, specific role, yeah. So I think, yeah, so there is still, Prof. Hannu, there is availability to adapt and adapt for the IS 2020, right? I mean, every department or school, they can modify or add or less some component of the IS 2020 based on the learning outcome that they want to achieve, right? There is some flexibility.
Yes. Yeah, in particular, if it's not applied to an undergraduate IS program, like sort of in a university, but some other context. So for sure, then there is a possibility and the need to sort of think mindfully about how to apply the different, and in general, as I said, these are still, the purpose is to guide rather than prescribe. So
okay, good, cool. Okay, next question. We still have some times. Okay, from Pak Didi, ya, Pak Didi Kurniawan. Pak Didi Kurniawan from University of Lampung.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think my question was answered in Appendix 2, yeah. Yeah, skip.
Yeah, I would rather refer to Appendix 2, but yeah, it is actually, it was not very easy to write the Appendix 2, so there is still, at least also for me, there is some learning to do on really understanding the Bloom's levels, and I believe that the different people have different ways of interpreting them, but for sure, I think we at least made an attempt to provide some propositions in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 actually as well.
Okay. Yep. Cool. Okay. Another question, please. Yep. From Perbanas, Pak Septama Prasetyo. You can ask directly, Pak Septama. Okay. Pak Septama, are you still on?
Thank you, Pak Tony.
No worries. Yep.
I will ask some question related to method for formulating curriculum in Indonesia. What if our major or undergraduate program doesn't have alumni yet, which is our IS major is really brand new? Can we just refer to other senior schools related to curriculum like ETS? Or is there any advice to our brand new IS department? Thank you, Prof. Hannu.
Well, I think it's once again, I would perhaps try to look at the situation in job market and to try to see if there are certain types of jobs where the industry is having difficulties to find applicants for job openings, so that could be one way to look at it, so that rather than just doing exactly similar program as in other schools, you could also try to differentiate a little bit, although most of the contents would probably be the same. So as we have been discussing about this nature of IS programs, and we need to have a broad coverage of many topics. there could still be a career track, like if there is a need for IS graduates who have a good knowledge on security, for instance, like the IT auditors or that sort of things. That could be one thing to consider, whether you would like to go into that direction. Of course, the analytics is something that is also often mentioned as something new, that there are not so many so there is a need for more university level graduates who understand the analytics and perhaps artificial intelligence and those things. So then that could be, so profiling a little bit, considering how to profile a new program so that it's not exactly the same as the previous ones is one option. But then if there are no such areas, and of course it's like always, it's a question of what you are comfortable with, or what kind of profiling you have faculty available either in your own department or perhaps in other disciplines in the school or university. So, and then there are many things to consider. But if it seems that in general there is need for more IS graduates, and perhaps with an emphasis on application developers, for instance, so then it's safe to also take a look at, and in any case it's good to take a look at the other senior schools and what they teach. So I think in some sense IS 2020 serves the same purpose as looking at the other schools' curriculum in some sense. So it's like trying to look at what is typical in what are the topics that are typically taught in IS programs. But that can also, and definitely when you look at the senior schools in Indonesia, they probably have already learned a lot about the industry needs and what the job market needs of IS graduates are in Indonesian context, and in that sense, it's a good input.
Okay. Yep. I think this is the last question, Prof. Hannu. So maybe I will give you opportunity, maybe some highlight about the IS 2020. Yeah. Before later, I will give some highlight too. So yeah, please give some highlight before we end this session.
Well, I think the highlights are the ones. I think the task force also agrees that one of the things is to try to think in terms of competencies rather than as knowledge areas and then courses, and that's a process that has started during the past decade in other curriculum guideline projects, and we are trying to advance that. So, and I think even though we adopted it from the computing discipline, the CC 2020 folks did a lot of work on that. So I think it's something to look into and try to think about. I think there are, at least I felt that there are many. It's a good way to think about education. And then the other thing is that we were trying to look at the competency requirements. I think many were expecting the more radical change, given all the digital technologies there are so many that have emerged and become to be used widespread in after 2010, that it almost felt like impossible to start even trying to list all the technologies that are emerging. But I think at the end of the day, still even the new technologies, when they are taken to use in organizations, the competencies that are needed are not radically different, and the students will need the basic competencies. So that's why we did not really remove any of the prior required courses or competency areas, with the exception of enterprise architecture, which was kind of it's not that it's very important, but it was in the undergraduate program we did not, and it's not. There were also evidence that it was not taught that much in the IS undergraduate programs. So some take it and some don't. So definitely it's inside a few competency areas as a competence, but not as a competency area. But still, looking at also the new required competency areas is probably something worthy of looking at, because, as said, we organized these panels and we tried to use many inputs, and then we concluded that these 4 new areas. So thinking about them more thoroughly would be the second one. And the third one is the Appendix 3, the 100 pages long attempt to identify what actually should we teach. And so it's more detailed than in the previous ones. So I think there is still room for improvement in that, and definitely when you go into such detail, it's also more likely that it's going to change. So the high level ideas of required competency areas are relatively stable. They don't change immediately. But then when you go to competencies and knowledge areas and those things, so then there is also a question of how to update them. But still, it's a brave attempt to provide somewhat detailed. So taking a look at that as well is might be of interest.
Okay. Yep. So I think we have got all of the highlights. So all participants, we can use the IS document, the current IS 2020 as our guidance, yeah, when we developing or we want to update curriculum for the IS department in Indonesia as well. And again, as Prof. Hannu said, that the task force recommend the IS 2020 as a guidance, yeah, not this is not a prescription that you have to do that, but it's give you a very good and actually detailed guidance, yeah. The most stable, as Prof. Hannu said, is the competencies, yeah, in the high level, that is competencies. In Indonesia, maybe this is similar like the capaian pembelajaran, ya, capaian or CPL, ya, CPL or learning program learning outcome. So we can use it, and it suggested it will be stable. But actually in IS 2020, it also, especially in Appendix 2 and Appendix 3, it gives us more detail about the topic or the subject or the competencies that we need to teach. We need to teach to the students, and even the level of the competencies. It also suggested in Appendix 2 and 3. But as Prof. Hannu suggests, that maybe because it is too detailed, this is a possibility that maybe will change, yeah, or can be modified based on the situation in every region, in every countries, yeah. So I think we have got all the important and information from Prof. Hannu as the co-chair of the IS 2020 task force. All the participants, would you please to give big applause to Prof. Hannu for the excellent presentation. Thank you, Prof. Hannu, for the time, your priceless time and excellent presentation. And I'll give time to the master ceremony again. Okay, please.
Mr. Tony, so we will have give the certificate to the Professor Hannu. So this is the certificate of the appreciation for the Professor Hannu. Thank you for your time, and we hope that we can collaborate again in the future event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hannu. We hope we can meet again in other event. Mr. Hannu, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pak Tony.
Yes.
Yep. So
I would like to thank you for the invitation and for the
Yeah.
excellent questions. So in Finland, when we do the PhD, we have the dissertation defense when when the doctoral candidate must answer a lot of questions and tough questions, and it kind of reminded me of,
so you
of
got
that as well.
No, you got a
But-
second PhD now.
Yes, yes, I even got a certificate. So, yeah, but I really enjoyed the questions. I think they were very good questions. So I hope, as they are, I will ask to get the questions as well for our task forces. And as said, there will be these workshops, so you are welcome to participate in the future workshops. But for today, this was very interesting.
And also for
seminar.
the AIS Indonesia, we are very welcome if the IS 2020 task force or AIS task force, any AIS task force needs some feedback from the AIS Indonesia community. Yeah. So if there is any survey or anything that we can collaborate or any participate to the or give some feedback to any document, global document of the IIS, we are really happy to support and encourage all the participants. We have more than 400 members in Indonesia, and there are more than 300 institutions joined with AIS Indonesia. So we are really happy to support any initiative that you need support from AIS Indonesia community. Yeah.
Yep, I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you.
As said, we are thinking of trying to establish something which would be more continuous type of work regarding these guidelines. So in Indonesia would be very well positioned to participate also in that kind of work.
Yep. And after pandemic, maybe hopefully that you can visit Indonesia again.
Yeah, it would be nice to do it again. So I actually visited it once and really enjoyed. But I only see Jakarta, and yeah, so it was not enough.
We still have 524 regions in Indonesia province. So you just visit one region. No worries.
I think I'll have to spend the rest of my life there.
No worries. Okay, so I think this is time to take a picture, yeah, Pak Izzat, yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, would you please everyone to turn on your photo so we can have a documentation with Prof. Hannu for this session, especially Pak Hatma, who has a national champion for security from. Oh, okay, silakan diaba-aba, Pak Izzat.
Okay. Open your camera. I will take a picture. 1, 2, 3. Okay, next page. 1, 2, 3. Last stage. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Hannu.
Very
Yep.
much.
Thank you,
Thank
Prof.
you.
Hannu. So see you later in other
See you
opportunity, even.
Yes.
Okay, I will give to the organizing committee now. Thanks.
Thank you very much to Professor Hannu Salmela and Dr. Tony for bringing a very interesting and engaging discussion with us today, talking about the information system curriculum. It was such a pleasure to have you with us today. The ending of the session concludes our workshop session in ISICO 2021. Thank you to all participants for attending the session. We hope you have learned and enjoyed your session in this workshop. My name is Johanna Nabila. I sincerely apologize for any mistakes I may have made during presenting as the Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tony, Mr. Hannu.
Terima kasih, Mbak Ibu. Izin.